Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to talk about a really clever fix that literally saved the internet from collapsing back in the 1990s. It's a great story about a rigid system, a ton of waste, and a surprisingly simple idea that changed absolutely everything. Okay, so let's just dive right in. This sounds super dramatic, but it's totally true. The early internet was built on a system that was, well, running out of gas fast. And the heart of the problem was the way it handed out addresses, a system that seems simple, but in reality was just incredibly wasteful.
All right, so to really get what was happening, we have to look at the original design. It was a system called Classful addressing, and it was basically the internet's first attempt at organizing itself.
Honestly, the best way to think about classful addressing is like buying a t-shirt. You don't get a custom fit, you just have to pick small, medium, or large. This system did the exact same thing with IP addresses. It forced the entire internet into just a few predetermined sizes.
And wow, when you look at these sizes, you can see how kind of crazy it was. You had Class C for small networks with just 254 addresses. Fine. But then you jump all the way to Class B with over 65,000. And Class A, a ridiculous 16.7 million addresses. There was nothing in between. You got one of these three, and that was it.
So you can probably guess what happened next, right? This rigid, one-size-fits-most idea created a huge problem that nobody really saw coming, and it threatened to stop the internet's growth dead in its tracks. And that problem was massive waste.
So picture this. You've got a growing company, and they need about 1,000 IP addresses for all their computers and servers. Pretty common scenario. Under the old Classful system, what do? Well, a Class C block is way too small, so they had no choice but to take the next size up.
And yeah, this chart just lays it all out, doesn't it? To get the 1,000 addresses they actually needed, they were handed a Class B block with over 65,000. That little sliver on the left is what they actually use. That giant tower on the right, that's what they were forced to take.
So here's the kicker. In this one very typical case, over 64,000 public IP addresses were just gone. Instantly taken off the market, locked away, totally unusable by anyone else. Now, multiply that by thousands of companies and yeah, you can see the internet was basically driving towards a cliff.
As the internet just exploded in popularity, this level of waste was simply not going to work. Something had to give. The engineers at the time knew they needed a fix, and what they came up with was this elegant, flexible solution that we still rely on every single day.
It's called Classless Inter-Domain Routing, or CIDR for short. And the big idea here was to just throw out those rigid classes, and instead allow for something called variable length subnet masks. In plain English, it meant that instead of those fixed blocks, network engineers could finally create networks of literally any size they needed.
You see, in the old Classful world, the size of your network was locked in by this thing called a subnet mask. You can think of it like a stencil that defines which part of the IP address is the network and which part is for the actual devices. And for a Class B network, that stencil was always the same. No flexibility at all.
CIDR just wiped all that away, and it replaced it with this. A simple / followed by a number. That's it. This slash notation lets you create a custom-fit network. A /24 gives you 256 addresses. A /22, that gives you 1,024 addresses, perfect for our company from earlier. It totally eliminated that whole wrong shirt size problem.
And I'm not exaggerating when I say this one simple change in notation gave network engineers the power to carve up the internet's address space efficiently. So let's take a look at exactly why this new, classless approach is just so much better.
So the move to classless addressing wasn't just some small improvement. It delivered 3 huge fundamental advantages that really enabled the internet to scale into what it is today.
First up, the big one, efficiency. It immediately slammed the brakes on how fast we were burning through IP addresses. Second, flexibility. Engineers can now design networks that were the exact right size for their needs. And third, and this is a benefit for the entire internet, it made routing more efficient. It allowed lots of small networks to be advertised as one big block, which kept the internet's core equipment from getting totally overwhelmed.
So how does this actually save addresses? Well, instead of handing out a massive, indivisible Class A block to just one company, an internet registry could now use CIDR to slice it up into thousands of smaller, custom-fit pieces. Then they could hand those out to all different organizations based on what they really needed. Almost nothing went to waste. Okay, so let's put it all together and do a final, side-by-side comparison to see just how big of a change this really was. On the left, you've got the past, Rigid sizing, clunky notation, tons of waste, and almost no flexibility. And on the right, you have the present, all thanks to CIDR. Flexible sizing, simple notation, low waste, and high flexibility. It's just a complete upgrade across the board, and an evolution the internet absolutely had to make to keep growing.
You know, the story of CIDR is just a fantastic example of pragmatic engineering solving a huge crisis. It absolutely saved the IPv4 internet, giving it decades of extra life. But here we are today with a whole new explosion of connected devices, and we're kind of facing a similar problem of scale all over again. It really makes you wonder, what's going to be the next simple slash that changes everything?